We also have Lilly Rep, our Education and Communications Coordinator, helping in the background. So if you have any questions or are having technical difficulties, then you can shoot Bailey a message as well, and she can try and work it out. Otherwise, we will just be cruising along through a couple slideshows here. Okay, so we are going to get started. Thank you everybody for joining us today for the East Kootenay Invasive Species Council's online annual general meeting. While we're waiting for any stragglers to join us, again, if you don't mind typing your name and any affiliation in the chat box, that will help us keep a record of who is attending today and also give everybody else who's attending an idea of the audience for our AGM this afternoon. I'll also ask everyone to remain muted for the time being. If you do have any questions for us or for our presenter later on, then you're welcome to type that into the chat box as well. And as I mentioned, Bailey Rep, our Education and Communications Coordinator, will also be monitoring the chat box for any questions or assisting with technical difficulties. I'm going to start recording the meeting, or Bailey's going to start recording it as well, so keep that in mind too, and we'll be saving the chat box again to help us keep a record of everybody who's attending today, and we will just get started here. So my name is Kendall Benish. I am the Program Manager for the East Kootenay Invasive Species Council. And I'm going to quickly introduce our chair, Randy Harris, who's joined us here today. And he's going to kick off our meeting and give a little welcome, and then I'll be stealing the meeting back from him. So go ahead, Randy.
Okay, my name is Randy Harris. I'm actually, for this year, I'm the chair of the East Kootenay Invasive Species Council. And I'd like to acknowledge before we start off that we are on the territory of the Tuknaka and Wempak nations, and we are, and they have been managing Selectivity for thousands of years. This is, of course, our meeting that we were supposed to have had last April to cover off the 2019 field season, but now that we're, thanks to COVID, we're actually well into fall, so we're covering off 2019 and a good part of 2020 just to keep everyone up to date. There is a legal requirement for us to carry this out, so we do have to go through the legal requirements of our society, which is to go through our financials for the year for 2019, as well as go through who's joining and leading our board this year. So if you bear with us, we actually have to go through this because it is a legal requirement. Because I'm more or less roadkill on the information highway and I actually have to talk to you through my cell phone rather than the computer, the vast majority of the talking is going to be done today by other people, and mostly Kendall with a lot of help from Bailey. And there will be a presentation as well from ISCBC. And hopefully we'll be able to get through this quite smoothly. And because this is the first time we've ever done a online Zoom meeting for our annual general meeting, it is going to be a bit strange, but please use your chat room. And we have to go through a voting process, and we'll probably be using more chat than than the talking we usually do. So yeah, and there is an opportunity for Kendall, but she has the control over whether to mute or unmute people on that. Everyone, in fact, except me, because I'm on a phone. So with that, I'll turn it back to Kendall. So Kendall, if you'd like to start us off in the process.
Great, thank you so much, Randy. A couple housekeeping items. I think most folks are familiar with Zoom by now, but again, please stay muted. And if you do have questions or any comments for ourselves or for our presenter later, then please enter them into the chat box. I'll go over this again later during our business portion, but for voting, we're going to do that through the chat box as well. So we'll ask for motions to be approved and seconded through the chat box by entering your name, and then we will be just waiting a few moments to see if anybody objects to a motion before moving along. Quickly going through our schedule of events. Again, we're just doing a little welcome and some housekeeping items here. We're going to be doing a very rapid fire review of the 2019 season. We typically have our AGM earlier in the spring in person, but of course, things were deferred this year due to global circumstances. We'll then move on to an update on our 2020 programming, including introductions to new projects that have been initiated this year that we're quite excited about. And we'll then move on to present the recipient of our 2019 Golden Shovel Award. This is an annual award that recognizes organizations or individuals that have made a significant contribution to invasive plant management in the region. We have someone really special joining us today to receive that award, so stay tuned for that. And then afterward, we're pleased to welcome our special guest of the day, which is Dave Ralph. Dave joins us from the Invasive Species Council of BC, and he'll be delivering a short presentation on considerations for timing of fall herbicide application for the control of invasive plants. Dave joins us with a wealth of experience and knowledge, and we'll have a few minutes after his presentation for questions. And then finally, we'll move on to the business portion of our AGM. Here we'll be approving last year's meeting minutes, going through our 2019 financial report, and of course, electing our 2020 Board of Directors. I'd also like to, of course, mention our sponsors for this AGM. So we're incredibly lucky to partner with many organizations in the region. In particular, the Ministry of Forest Lands, Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development, as well as the Columbia Basin Trust, both provide funding for us to proceed with coordination, awareness, and outreach activities. And that makes events like this possible and a lot of the work that we do in the region possible. Tech has also generously sponsored this event, so we'll be sending out some small invasive species thank you tokens to each participant today. If you haven't provided your address through the online registration system, then please forward that to Bailey. You should all have her email address. And then we also have a few door prizes that we'll be sending out throughout the meeting. So pay attention for that. We'll have a couple quiz questions, and then we have one door prize at the very end for folks who have stuck it through to the end here. Okay, so a really quick introduction to EKISC board and staff, the folks who work to deliver invasive species programming across the region. So EKISC operates with 4 year-round staff members. 2 of them are part-time over the winter, and we also typically hire 2 to 3 summer assistants each year to help with field operations as well as outreach and education programming. We have myself, the program manager, Kendall Benish, and we have 2 field staff, Danny Smart, our field operations coordinator, Gabriella Hallis, our interim field operations manager, and Bailey Rep, who's online here with us today, who's our education and communications coordinator. You'll probably notice that Jesse Pelaposki, who is our long-term education and communications staff, has moved on this last summer to a position with Parks Canada. And Katie Reed, who has been our long-term field operations manager, is on parental leave. So we have Gabriella filling in. And we were really lucky this year to have Emily Markholm return as a summer assistant, and a new summer staff, Emma DeGroot, joined us, and she's still out in the field today. So we have most of our field staff out. So it's me and Bailey holding the fort here. And we also have an active and diverse board of directors with representatives from provincial and local governments, industry, local stewardship organizations, and livestock and farming associations. We'll be going through our board elections a little bit later today, but we are super grateful to have so many passionate individuals on our board that really volunteer and dedicate many hours to helping EKISC run smoothly throughout the year. I wanted to touch quickly just on EKISC's role in the region. So we work to coordinate invasive species management in the East Kootenays, and we're one of many of these regional invasive species organizations in the province that work closely with ministries to coordinate and administer invasive plant treatments on public lands. So we're not a land manager, but we work closely with land managers to facilitate a coordinated approach to invasive species management. And we work really hard to foster increased support for invasive species management throughout the region. And we do very little work on private lands, but most of it is on public or Crown land. We're also the main delivery agency for invasive species education and outreach, and administer training and outreach opportunities to many different stakeholder groups in the region. For 2019, we sent out our annual report with the meeting package as well, so you're welcome to look through that. But just a few quick highlights, something that we would have gone over in the spring. We had 28 funders, which was quite a few more from the previous year due to some additional projects that we were working on. We, as usual, worked with provincial and regional governments, conservation organizations, quite a few granting agencies, and some private corporations to coordinate and deliver invasive plant management work. And most of the work that we did in 2019 and that we typically do is coordination and administration of fee-for-service work. So we work very closely with the Ministry of Forests as well as the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure to deliver their large plant management programs, as well as many other players throughout the region. Last year we had over 3,300 plant sites treated for chemical or mechanical treatments. We inventoried over 4,300 hectares of land, which is a huge amount of area to cover. So a lot of that was public Crown land, and we also did some private inventories as well. We also assisted with the provincial EDRR programming, so that was treatments of perennial pepperweed and black henbane, which are two provincial early detection rapid response species that we have in our region. And we also collected 145 water samples at 12 lakes to test for invasive mussels. And of course, thankfully, all of them came back negative. And for education and outreach, we reached almost 6,000 people directly or indirectly through events. So this was through a combination of attending events with outreach booths. We put on many courses and workshops. We had lots of volunteers helping with community weed pulls and interpretive plays and helping us at outreach events as well. And throughout the year, we're constantly updating our social media and website and delivering a monthly newsletter that helps disseminate invasive species information out to the region. One really cool highlight that we had last year is we developed a new outreach workshop, and it was watercolor painting with invasive species. So that was quite neat, and we put on 3 workshops, one in Fernie, Cranbrook, and Invermere, and it was quite successful, and we're hoping that next year we might be able to put on some more of these workshops to help engage new audiences. All right, moving on to 2020 highlights. This field season has been jam-packed, and it's still going. So as I mentioned, we still have our field staff out doing monitoring and collecting some data at some of our project locations. And we're also doing fall treatments right now. So it's quite active. We're thankful that the weather has provided to be supportive of this fall's field work, which is great. This year we have about 20 funders, so down a little bit from last year, but our overall funding is actually more than 2019. So we've been able to expand a couple larger multi-stakeholder projects and retain a lot of our previous year's funders. Again, we're still primarily delivering fee-for-service work. Our main funders are the Ministry of Forests and the Ministry of Transportation, and we work with many other agencies to deliver and coordinate this fee-for-service work, which is primarily herbicide application for invasive plants, and we also do a lot of mechanical treatments. Our in-house field staff were very busy this year. We conducted quite a few invasive plant inventories again, primarily on Crown and public lands. We also did another small inventory for Ackham community and had the opportunity this year to also work with Environment and Climate Change Canada on a small inventory up in the Columbia Valley as well. We again did a lot of weed pulls. So this lovely infographic that Bailey made here, you can definitely tell her slides versus mine, but we've pulled over 55 bags of weeds. So we've covered a lot of ground, taking invasive weeds off of the landscape. And we've also been establishing quite a few long-term effectiveness monitoring plots. So that's something we're trying to do more with our long-term projects, is install long-term monitoring areas so that we can see effectiveness of treatments over time. We're also still working with the Grassland Rangeland Enhancement Program to facilitate rancher sprayer treatments on Crownland range tenures. And we're also working on some management plans for different groups. You'll be happy to know that we're still monitoring for zebra and quagga mussels in East Kootenay Lake. So that's something a lot of the regional invasive species organizations do. We just wrapped up our sampling at the end of September. And as far as we know, for all the samples that have come in so far, we are still zebra and quagga mussel free, which is great. And we're hoping to continue on that program next year. And we've got a couple new projects this year that we are very excited about. The first one is the Elk Valley Invasive Plant Management Plan. So we've partnered with various Elk Valley clubs and local stakeholders to develop and implement a multi-stakeholder invasive plant management plan specific to the Upper Elk Valley. So essentially Elkford and North, with a little bit of our study area south of there. This is year one of the project, and the focus of it has been on collecting a lot of data. So prior to this project, this was a very data deficient area. We didn't have a lot of information on invasive species presence and distribution. So we've spent weeks and weeks and weeks out inventorying the Upper Elk Valley, and we'll be working this winter to update our management plan and continue to engage new partners for subsequent years. And the other new project that we are working on this year is the Wycliffe Conservation Complex. So this is part of Kootenay Connect with the Kootenay Conservation Program. And we are working with the Nature Trust of BC, the Nature Conservancy of Canada, and the Ministry of Forests to develop an invasive species management plan. And as part of this, we conducted over 500 hectares of invasive plant inventory this summer and established permanent monitoring plots, and we're out doing some fall treatments right now. And then finally, for 2020 is the main delivery agency for invasive species education and outreach. I'm sure you can all imagine how our programming was impacted this year. We typically do spend the summer focusing on in-person outreach events, workshops, and training sessions. But this year, along with many other organizations, we did have to adapt. So we have provided some limited physically distanced outreach booths and training sessions. We've experimented with online training courses and presentations, and we've continued to offer some weed pull stipends to community groups. Throughout the year, and definitely focused over the summer, we've tried to stay engaged and in touch with everybody through online outreach, through our social media channels, our newsletters, and our website as well. So everything that we learned this year through our small trials and learning how to adapt and engage, will be making sure that we consider all of that for our outreach programming next year. Ooh. Okay, so that wraps up a look at our 2020 programming. So I am going to pass it off now to Stephanie Daniels, who works with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure and who has been on our board for a very long time as well. She's going to be presenting the Ekisk Golden Shovel Award for 2020. And Stephanie, have you been able to join us today? I know you were out in the field earlier.
I am here. I'm just trying to get my button over here to the right button.
Oh, groovy. You got it.
Yeah, I am here. And I have to correct Kendall. We are awarding the 2019 recipient. And it is my pleasure to announce the recipient of the 2019 Golden Shovel Award this year. I am excited because my first recollection of meeting Pam Turek was at an East Kootenay Invasive Plant Council meeting more than 10 years ago now, Pam. We were at the regional district offices a long time ago before it was revitalized. And she joined as a representative of the KLA, the Kootenai Livestock Association, and came ready to engage that very first meeting, and I was so impressed. I have considered myself very fortunate to be serving on the board of directors with Pam. We've all relied on her calm demeanor and logical thinking and her common sense when discussing issues and making decisions for the council. She's kept us on the straight and narrow with her knowledge of our constitution and she's worked very hard to solidify our numerous corporate policies for which we have relied on her heavily. Some of the highlights of her time with us. Pam was involved with the board when we first met with Bob Johnstone and Ingrid Lipa to readdress how the board did business. And that was an interesting exercise, wasn't it, Pam? We worked our way through a few program coordinators, program managers, and even an executive director. Pam served as the chair, the vice chair, probably a few other positions I've forgotten, chaired the HR committee for a while, and I believe she helped out with the contract committee as well. She helped with some planning and sat through numerous contract debriefs as well. Pam also worked with RDK to help set up the Neighborhood Invasive Plant Program, fondly referred to now as NIP. I would say we've certainly gotten our money out of her service. That big paycheck that she's received at the end of each year. Yeah. My first favorite memory, I think, is when we had organized a field trip in 2014 to see ongoing invasive work site challenges that we were facing in the Elk Valley and see how Tech was addressing some of their issues. It was a day-long trip and we had rented a bus out of Jaffrey. We had a very interesting day. We had lunch in Sparwood, and I believe it was on our way back from the Elk Valley that the bus began to make funny noises, and we stopped at a mechanic shop there in Fernie for what we thought would be just a short visit that turned into an unexpected adventure. The bus was put out of service, and we had to rent another bus to come out to Fernie from Cranbrook to rescue all of us. I have to say we got to know each other very well while we waited for several hours. It has been my pleasure working with you, Pam. Already we miss your presence as we sit around the table discussing the affairs of the now East Kootenai Invasive Species Council. You should be proud of your contribution to what we have grown here in the East Kootenays. We have very much appreciated your work with us, and we would like to recognize your significant contribution to the East Kootenai Invasive Species Council through the years with our much coveted golden shovel. With this award, you join a small group of people that we honor and appreciate the most. Thank you for going above and beyond the call of duty. Thank you for your sincere desire to make a difference in the ranching community in the East Kootenays. And thank you very much for your commitment to the East Kootenai Invasive Species Council. That's it. Pam, do you have a few words to say?
I do. Thanks very much, Stephanie. Oh, there I am. Oh, and I still have my paper. I have my paper. I haven't looked at it yet. Just waiting. You know, I was quite taken aback when Kendall had called me to tell me that I was going to be presented with this year's Golden Shovel, and yeah, surprise. She was advised afterwards that she wasn't supposed to do that. But I wasn't surprised. Randy kept it real. I got to hold that yesterday for maybe about 5 seconds. Randy took it back, said something about it being Dan Murphy's, and we had this need to reuse and recycle. So, Kendall promises me I will get to see it again, though. But, you know, since Kendall did call, and I had mentioned to Kendall and Randy and Stephanie yesterday, you know, it's really nice. It's so nice to be acknowledged, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate being recognized for the time that I gave to Ekisk. But, you know, I know now, I didn't think I was going to get teary, but you know, it was really more about what I got back and the opportunities that I got from Ekisk. You know, when I think about it's really about the faces and the places that I've been to, the people that I've met over the years. And I wouldn't have had that opportunity, if it hadn't been for my involvement in the organization. And, so many of you have come from such diverse backgrounds, whether it's, retired biologists or the backcountry enthusiasts, the backyard gardeners, the area controllers that, took the time to take me out in the field and educate me. And it's truly an example of how invasives impact us all. And I think the living landscapes that we care about. And I think that diversity was one of the biggest lessons for me. It really taught me about listening to people, and when I got involved, I will say, Stephanie, I actually thought I was pretty good at listening, really listening. But now I realize how much hard work it is. And I really give thanks for that. So my appreciation to all of you, all the best in the future, and be safe, everyone, and stay healthy. Thanks again. And actually, I'm really enjoying how this AGM is going. Nice job, guys. Yeah, my last meeting was in December. How our world has changed. Okay. Thanks,
It is,
Steph.
and you're welcome. Thank you, Pam, for all those years. I've neglected to say that we got together, as you can tell from this picture, for a short time in the Rotary Park in Cranbrook yesterday. Pam came in to bring her mom and dad into Cranbrook for appointments, and we took advantage of that and socially distanced just enough to give her a look at the golden shovel. It had to go in for some corrections and some repairs, but she will get it back, Kendall tells me, this weekend. So she did get to see that it was real and get her mind around that she now needs to look for a place to hang it or use it.
That's right. And I
That's
got
right.
this too.
Oh yes, I forgot. I forgot that. I thought you were going to crack it open last night.
I'll have that glass now. Well,
Yeah.
I listen to the rest of the meeting.
That's right. Congratulations. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Over to you, Kendall.
Great. Thank you so much, Pam, and thanks, Stephanie, for the great prepared words for Pam. It's really nice to hear from both of you, and yeah, what a legend in the invasive species community here in the East Kootenays. So that wraps up the first portion of our AGM today. And I'm now pleased to, oh my, yes, okay, actually first, we have a meeting prize, our first one. So I'm not looking at the chat box, so if everybody wants to prepare, we have a quiz question here. So if somebody can type in the chat box and name one of our new project areas for 2020. So I named 2 areas that we're working at for new projects this year. And if you could put one of those in the chat box. And Bailey, maybe I'll ask you if we've got a winner in there yet.
Well, it looks like Robin was right and ready, and she was the first one in there with
Wycliffe.
Wycliffe.
Yeah, you're right, Robin. You are rapid fire on the responses. So that is right. So the Elk Valley, we have our big project in the Upper Elk Valley, and then we're also working on the Wycliffe Conservation Complex. So great, nice work. You'll be getting something extra special sent to you after this meeting. Okay, so now I am very pleased to introduce our guest this afternoon, Dave Ralph, who will be presenting on considerations for fall application of herbicide. Dave is joining us from the Invasive Species Council of BC. He joined ISC BC in May 2015 and is currently the manager of operations. He's worked extensively with land managers and the agricultural industry in developing invasive plant management strategies and carrying out research for invasive plant control and management recommendations for pasture, range, and intensive crop production. His current role with the council is training and project coordination, and I think especially right now with this amazing fall weather we're having, it's a timely opportunity to learn about some considerations for fall herbicide application. So thanks again for Dave for joining us. I'm going to exit my screen sharing now. And we did a trial run with Dave here. So hi, Dave. You should be able to share your screen now and unmute yourself and go ahead with the presentation.
Thank you, Kendall, and thank you very much to the East Kootenay Invasive Species Council for inviting me to speak with you today. I'm just getting mine set up here. Great, so thanks very much. Yes, this is sort of like a little bit of going back home, except via video. I was fortunate enough when I was with the Ministry of Agriculture in the mid-2000s to be part of the East Kootenay Steering Committee for the Weed Council. Had a chance to work with Kevin Patterson and Faye Street and Alan Edwards. Irene Teskey was on at the time, and as well as Stephanie. So hello to both of you today, and good to chat with you. Discuss a little bit today about fall herbicide application and timing. We have done, myself and my colleagues have done a lot of timing and rate trials over the decades, starting back in the 1980s and 1990s and even into the 2000s across the province. And we were doing a lot of spring, summer, and fall application of herbicides for our invasive plant species. And we were finding that we were getting some really good results from some of the fall herbicide application. So of course, when you're considering the herbicide as a choice for your management tool, you've got a lot of considerations and factors that you want to be taking into account. Of course, what's your target species? What is the stage of growth for your plants that you're treating? What are some of the crops or other non-target plants on site that you may want to be not causing any damage? You always want to consider your subsequent cropping. More often than not, that's usually in annual cropping situations, but even in perennial forage situations, you might want to be renovating. So what are you going to bring in subsequent to that crop that you're renovating? Soil texture, and what's the depth of the soil? Are we dealing with a very coarse soil, or are we dealing with a sandy loam that's deep? All play a part in the performance of your herbicides and your choice. Of course, your distance from water and your consideration of ground slope. You want to make sure that your pesticide-free zones are intact and that you're considering those. Herbicides modes of action. There's a few different kinds of actions that herbicides carry out in order to kill their target species. Typically foliar herbicides are things like paraquat or diquat. They're really a chemical burn down. They're not very good on perennials. They just burn off the vegetative part of the plant, and they don't translocate into the root. So the annuals are typically ones that you're going to use a contact or a foliar herbicide on. Translocating herbicides, products that we've been using for a lot of years. What is the selectivity of them? And also, what is the residuality of them? So glyphosate, of course, non-selective and kills everything, whereas your 2,4-Ds, your picloram, your axion herbicides, they do their effect, and they are most effective on broadleaf herbicides. So you want to consider residuality of your product. Non-residual, of course, glyphosate, some of these other products like contact herbicides like paraquat. Short to moderate residuality. 2,4-D, what we typically find, and this is often very soil dependent and very weather dependent, is 2,4-D is going to give you 30, might give you 60 days of residuality. Dicamba, typically we're looking at maybe up to a year. Some of my colleagues have told me that in very droughty years, very dry years, you can expect dicamba as the active to maybe reside in the soil and be available to target plants for maybe up to a year and a half. Aminopyrrolid and metsulfuron methyl, Milestone and or Clearview, looking at usually a couple of years worth of residuality as well. It often, again, it depends on soils and it depends on weathers. Some soils you can maybe get up to 3 years. And of course, there's the long-term residual products like picloram Grazon is a picloram plus 2,4-D. Picloram, we've seen activity up to 7 years in soils that are just right, not too organic, not too coarse, and we've seen some very effective long-term control. And then, of course, there's soil applied. Those are typically pre-plant incorporated herbicide products, and those are things like Eptam, typically used in cropping, corn production. It's applied as a pre-plant application and then covered over with implements as well to cover the herbicide and sort of almost tarp the herbicide with dirt. Factors affecting herbicide efficacy. This is probably the most important slide, I think, if I've got one here, is spray equipment calibration. And your spray equipment has to be good condition. You don't want leaks. You don't want opportunities for a hose to break or nozzles to clog or something like that. You calibrate frequently. Your delivery rate is critical to correct application rates. I can't tell you how many times over the years I've had people, ranchers, producers, sometimes, you know, they're people from industry. How much herbicide do I put in my spray tank? And I'll just say, well, what's your delivery rate? And they'll go, I don't know. I just want to know how much to put in it. And you just have to know what your delivery rate is on a per hectare basis in order to get your proper herbicide application rates. I was at a workshop a number of years ago, and a lady was saying, I just want to know how much to put in. I don't want to bother calibrating or anything. And I used the example of milestone. I said, so if you're putting on twice as much milestone as you need, you're running the risk of not getting a good kill. You're running the risk of herbicide resistance. I said, but you would be spending an extra $1,800 for another container of milestone versus the original container that you would have only needed if you had known your calibration and the right rate. And that really brought her around, and it's unfortunate. It became a matter of economics, but hopefully she got the message. Incorrect application rates. You always want to be reading your label. What's the recommended rate for that specific species, your target species? Do you want to be using a high rate, or is it acceptable control with a lower rate? So too low a rate will give you poor efficacy if you're below the label rate. You're also court resistance of that herbicide, of that plant to that herbicide. You're not absolutely killing it out. It's sort of giving it a bit of a suppression. Maybe it's tickling it a bit, but it's going to regrow and it's not going to be killed off. Those seeds can be viable, and they've already started their first step to resistance. Often what's not known is we have that too high of a rate over and above the label rate can also give poor efficacy due to the metabolic process. The plant will sort of be shocked. It'll shut down. It won't carry out its translocation and its process, and that can also be a step towards resistance. Often here over the years, well, if 1 liter per hectare will do the trick, I'm going to put on 2 liters, and that'll do it better. Better job. And that's just not the case with herbicide application. The chemical companies have spent millions of dollars to ensure that the rate that they have on their label is going to be the effective rate and do the job that it's intended to. Water volumes, you read the label again. Sometimes water volumes for example, Tordon 22K, 400 liters of mix per hectare. That's a pretty high delivery rate, but still we follow the label because that's the law. So often you'll see herbicide labels will have a range for their delivery rate as well. Typically lower volumes, lower delivery rates are in areas that are maybe grasslands, not a big canopy, and you don't need that kind of volume of mix in order to penetrate perhaps a closed canopy, a crop or a pasture that's got a very dense canopy, but it still has a weed component that you're wanting to deal with. So with that closed canopy, the higher volumes give you a better opportunity to penetrate that canopy and get some herbicide to the soil. That's certainly one of the main things you're trying to do with the residual herbicide. Maybe a higher volume, not so much affect an issue with something like glyphosate where it has no residuality, but still you want to get good coverage to all your foliage. And too little coverage or too much coverage. Don't spray your herbicides to runoff if you're typically doing it. You might have to do a little bit more coverage if you have a heavy closed canopy. Annuals versus perennials, usually different types of herbicides, different stages of growth. Application timing. What's your weed growth stage at? When are you going to go in and reseed that area if you are? Are there seedlings or bolting, or are they actively growing? Are they more a mature plant? Things like products like 2,4-D, not usually very effective on plants that are more than, say, the 4 to 5 leaf stage. When you get weed species that are that beyond those stage, 2,4-D can not be as an effective product as maybe another one. Maturity can reduce effectiveness. Your plant is slowing down. Its metabolic process, it's starting to harden off. A lot of energy is going to the top of the plant to produce viable seed. So, maybe it's early spring application, or it's a fall application when we see regrowth, and I'll get to that. Weather and climatic influences, of course, rain events, we're always keeping our eye to the horizon. A little more difficult in the East Kootenays with the towering mountains, a little easier on the prairies for those farmers, or some of the Peace River or Caribou. You can often see a rain event coming as though it can come quickly, usually 4 to 6 hours after an application is when you're in the safe zone for having applied herbicides. And of course, if it is raining, that's not the time to be spraying. You're quickly getting the herbicide is running off being washed off the leaves, and it's being very much diluted. Often the herbicides that they respond best when they get a good application to the foliage. There's good absorption, and then there is also some herbicide laid down on the soil for residual control. And of course, there's temperatures. One of the things that we see is that zero wind, warm, and humidity can make herbicide droplets hang in the air. When I was working out of the Ministry of Agriculture office in the late 80s, there was a fellow who phoned us up. He had had a couple of acres of tomatoes, and they were killed off. They were all cupping and curling. He was it was completely stumped. So we went out there and looked, and there was a turf grower that was up about half a mile up the road. He had gone out early one morning and used a tri-kill, 2,4-D dicamba mecoprop for broadleaf weed control. It was really humid. There was no wind at all. Temperature wasn't hot, but it ended up floating down the road 1.5 miles and started knocking off his tomatoes. They're that susceptible to oxyon herbicide. So watch that. Not so much out in the grasslands or pastures, but consider that when you're spraying around sensitive crops. Soil conditions, pH, organic matter, and the texture. If you've got a very coarse soil, may reduce the residuality or carry over to the spring if you're doing a fall application. Organic matter, heavy organic soils will break down the herbicide molecules, the active ingredient molecules, quicker than, say, a sandy loam. So you might get reduced residual and carryover. Spray retention, always a consideration. Things, species like hawkweeds got very little leaf on them. Blueweed have got the pubescent hairs. They all serve to keep that plant or that invasive species from absorbing the plant's the herbicide into the leaf. So using a surfactant will reduce retention. and help that droplet spread out over that leaf surface and better intake and uptake by the plant. So you might want to consider that as well. Plants like Dalmatian toadflax, sort of a rubbery leaf. They're not a real porous leaf, so they, like to have the herbicide be retained on those foliage as well. Herbicide metabolism selectivity due to plant physiology. So like there's certain plant families, picloram doesn't affect mustards. Aminopyrrolid has a real hard time on mustards as well, whereas metsulfuron methyl doesn't. And I'm speaking mostly here of Horiolisum. We've done a lot of work over the years in Horiolisum. Aminopyrrolid alone didn't do anything with Horiolisum, but then again, aminopyrrolid plus metsulfuron methyl in the form of Clearview is a really good product on Horiolisum. And if you're able to add 2,4-D to that Clearview to make it the Reclaim, all the better. That's what we find, or I found in my work, is that we use Clearview on Horiolisum all the time, and the same with blueweed. And we're not sure, Escort is a product that has metsulfuron methyl alone, and it does a good job, but it doesn't do the job that Clearview does. And so there's a synergy between aminopyrrolid and metsulfuron methyl in Clearview that's hasn't been able to be explained to me by the chemical companies or the research scientists, but as some of them say, we're not seeing any adverse effects, so we'll take that win. So a fall application, it's all going to depend on the species. Some species don't get great effects, and there's not great efficacy on fall application. For example, leafy spurge, we don't see the good efficacy like we do in the summer or spring with leafy spurge. And we're not sure why that is the case, but it has the same characteristics as a lot of the other perennial creeping rooted plants, but just we don't see that. Mustards and shepherd's purse, winter annuals, there's those rosettes are coming up first thing in the middle of the fall. They're getting ready for spring, and often they will actually set up a terminal shoot, a stem in the fall, and then they are the ones that are first and ready to go in the spring. And typically mustards and shepherd's purse are the real problem in new alfalfa or new grass seedings for forage. Biennials, fall rosettes only. There's no point in spraying a burdock that's matured in its second year. It's a biennial. There's no point in spraying it in the fall after it's hardened off. It's not going to regrow again next spring anyway, or the next year. So seedlings only for biennials in the first year. Or, don't hesitate to spray a biennial when it's in the early stages of spring growth in the second year of growth. Perennials, creeping rooted plants, they're active root growth in the fall. There's increased translocation of energy from the plant into the root after a light frost. It's a trigger. It's nature's trigger to the plant. It's time, winter's coming. Let's store up all the energy we can in these extensive system of roots that they have with those plants. Tap-rooted plants, the same effect. That light frost is a trigger to the plant to get all of the energy it can into the roots. Seed-producing plants, the warm fall temperatures, September into October, we've been having wonderful fall weather the last few years, and it always comes with some increased moisture. That causes the seeds of the seed-producing perennials and biennials to really germinate, and we often see a big flush of seedlings and rosettes in the fall. I'll go over some of the herbicides here. Herbicidal effects occur primarily from the uptake of the plant foliage and the translocation through the plant. And then the secondary action is typically through soil uptake. So the residual herbicides we're wanting to apply them to the soil as well as to get good foliage coverage. As the herbicide in the soil leaches vertically down into the soil, it's going to come in contact with any roots, any rhizomatous plants, the terminal shoots will come in contact with herbicide and knock it back and control it that way. And then with the residual chemical or the molecule in the soil, any seeds that are germinating, once that radical gets developed and they reach the level in the soil where the herbicide's being bound, that will kill off the subsequent seedlings that are germinating. So milestone, a maximum of 0.5 liters of product per hectare once a season, registered for all of those locations and sites. It's reading these labels, read them carefully. Knapweed on the milestone label has good control with 0.25 liters of product per hectare. So that would allow you to do actually 2 applications of milestone in a single season, sort of contradicting the 0.5 one per season. I've always thought, on herbicides that labels say only may be applied to a site 1 time per season. And if you go back in the fall, after a spring application, and you see plants that are growing and that are, at the site and they haven't been affected, then, I always look at that obviously is a soil or a part or of the site that hasn't been treated. Otherwise, a product like Milestone or Clearview would have that residual and you wouldn't see good, healthy plants. So, keeping that in mind. Apply when small and actively growing. You don't want it too mature. Milestone's sort of a unique product label in that it states on it, it provides pre-emergence control of germinating seeds and control of emerging seedlings of subsequent plants following application. And although that's the purpose and the role of residual herbicides, we very rarely see that on a label. So it's nice to see a product like Milestone, one of the new generation type of herbicides. We've only had it for maybe 10 years to recognize that the residuality of a product is really a pre-emergence part of that application. Clearview, selective, and see that it talks about post-emergent control. But post-emergent, the difference would be you don't spray Clearview down for expecting to control subsequent plants when there's none there. And the pre-emergent would be, perhaps allow you to do that with Milestone. Again, apply to plants that are actively growing and 1 application per season. Grazon, Picloram plus 2,4-D, we use a lot of Milestone and Clearview. The residuality of those products is a little less than, say, Grazon or Tordon, but still a good herbicide product in the right spot. And you apply that once per year. And with leafy spurge and toadflax, again, here use of a surfactant is always efficacious for your control. 22K, straight Picloram, about 22%. When I started in this in invasive plants over 40 years ago, Tordon 22K was on the market and it was a widely used herbicide. It was very well, it did very good job at controlling, a lot of our initial knapweed sites that we were trying vigorously to knock back. So it's persistent and will carry over when you're using Picloram with Tordon or with Grazon. You really got to know what your subsequent crops are. Is there going to be any broadleafs go in there? Is there going to be any trees, shrubs? Picloram can carry over, as I said, up to 7 years, and it doesn't take much. When we're doing a bioassay for carryover or residuality, or to see if there's any herbicides like Picloram or whatever in the soil, we'll use tomatoes, and we'll use cucurbits and pumpkins and cucumbers and stuff, because they're very sensitive to Picloram. And even the slightest hint of Picloram, and they start cupping and curling, and we see a lot of epinasty. So Picloram really great on these rhizomatous creeping rooted plants, like the ones listed here. Lawntrell, one application per season. Established grasses, and actually Lawntrell label does say, apply at the shot blade stage for grasses when you're spraying into grasses, or in the fall after harvest or early spring. So it's a very good product on Canada thistle, and we like clopyralid for other broadleaf weed control under conifers, under that drip line if you're wanting to get there. It's registered for balsam tree plantation, so no effect on conifers. And then, of course, there's glyphosate. We don't recommend a lot of glyphosate because it kills everything, but it does have its spot, and a lot of in-crop. Matter of fact, a lot of the fall herbicide applications and recommendations on a lot of the glyphosate labels came from burn down of some of the crops on the prairies in the fall, for some of the seed crops. And they were seeing great control of Canada thistle and toadflax in those fall applications. So it came onto the label. And of course, if you're going to be going to renovate a field that's currently in alfalfa, you would fall is going to be your best time for doing that burn down or that renovation and herbicide application. So just some slides here of some of the fall. I've got, what, 10 minutes left, Kendall?
I was just going to let you know we've just got just a few minutes left now, Dave. So if you're able to whiz through the last few slides here, that'd be awesome.
Okay, so what I'm really wanting to show here are, heavy frost prior to application definitely are going to reduce it. You want to ensure that that frost is a light frost. It's not a killing. It'll kill off maybe tomatoes and some of your garden plants, and you're very sensitive, but it doesn't affect the perennials or biennials that we're dealing with that are invasive species. You can see here. Can you see my cursor? On the left hand? You can, okay. See, this is Horiolism, and there's a lot of regrowth from that. Horiolisms can be an annual, biennial, or perennial, but obviously this is a perennial, or at least a biennial, and there's a lot of foliage, basal foliage, and a lot of germinating seeds in the fall. This is actually a fall spot. It had been mowed down earlier in the season, and it came back like that. It was going to determine it was going to go to flower. Hoary cress, timing's critical in the fall, and you want to ensure that the seedlings and new shoots have enough regrowth to accept adequate amounts of herbicide. This is especially so in the creeping rooted or rhizomatous plants. You got to have enough foliage to accept enough herbicide in to translocate down into the ends of those roots. There's Canada thistle. This up here on the top right had been mowed down. It regrew. This is probably the beginning of September. And then you can see the rooting system, the rhizome system for Canada thistle there. It's just very extensive. So you've got to remember that, not enough foliage to accept it will not be able to translocate enough into the extensive rooting system. Surfactants will help increase that absorption, and thus increases the absorption into the plant leaf. Fall for knapweed, tons of rosettes coming up in the fall, and old plants here on the right, and they're obviously regrowing again, and there's some good leaf there to accept herbicide, and then there's some not a great canopy on here to allow good penetration to the soil. Toad flax, here you can see a lot of, new growth from the base or the root crown of the plant after it's hardened off and set seed. Or on the top left here, you can see there's a new shoot, some shoots coming out, and in the middle from that rhizome, and they're just got a lot of good green foliage. And then often we see toad flax is growing well into the fall and setting seed at the same time, but it's still got some nice green foliage. So just a last couple of slides here. We, on our pest management plans, it allows us, and in the Integrated Pest Management Act, it allows us to spray 1.5 meters radius from a single plant. And so I often do this in a workshop. What you'll go to a site and you'll spray it in the spring, and then you'll come back in the fall and you see a lot of plants growing between the plants that you've sprayed. And what you haven't done is you maybe haven't taken advantage of that 1.5 meters. So between two plants, there's a 3-meter gap. So what happens is that people spray the plant and they spray an area around the plant that's soil applied, and that's what you end up getting. And all of these areas between the blue spots have no herbicide in them, and that's where your seeds are going to germinate and grow, and new plants will come up and they're not going to be affected. You're allowed to spray the 1.5 meters from a plant, so why not cover that 3 meters between each plant? So this would be how I would approach a site that had this, weeds, plants in this type of design or pattern. I would be spraying that as almost a broadcast spray and spraying, 1.5 meters beyond the outside plants. And that way you'll come back and you'll see a much better result the following year. I think this is especially the case with backpack spraying. We see a lot of inconsistent control with backpack spraying because unlike a boom or a boomless nozzle, you're not getting that overall coverage. And that's it for you. Hopefully you got something out of that. And like I always say, like most other weed management methods, herbicides offer the short-term solution, not the cure. And use of does not address the reasons why there's weed problems there. Spraying merely treats that symptom. So prevention of establishment, prevention of spread and through pathways. That's the way we're going to stop the invasive plants from moving and get better control. So I will leave it there. And do we have time for any questions, Kendall?
Yeah, we probably have time just for maybe one, maybe two questions, but
Sure.
In the meantime, I'll also encourage folks to reach out to you directly. Thanks for putting your contact information up there so you can see Dave's email address, extension at bcinvasives.ca. And I see Robin Hooper here from the Columbia Shuswap has asked, and I've also had a couple inquiries. Would you be all right with sharing your PowerPoint presentation with us, and we could send it out to folks who would be interested in having it?
Sure, I will put it into a PDF and send it to you, Kendall.
That would be fabulous. Thank you so much, Dave. And we'll be sending you a little thank you as well in the mail. Bailey will probably reach out to you to get your mailing address if she doesn't have it already. I haven't seen any questions pop up in the chat box, so maybe we'll just keep cruising forward in the interest of time. Thank you so much again for joining us, Dave, and sharing all that information with us. And I am going to steal your screen sharing capabilities here and move on. And you probably won't be surprised that now I'm going to go ahead and do a really quick rapid fire meeting prize number 2. And the question that I have is, and you'll have to put it in the chat box as soon as you can. So where would you find, or how would you find information on the correct delivery or application rate of a herbicide? So how would I find that information? Where would I find it? And Bailey, I'll ask if you can just keep a look on that chat box again and see if we have a winner.
It looks like Stephanie was in there first, Stephanie Daniels.
Right, and what is her answer?
Yes, on the label.
You betcha, yeah. So that's all on the herbicide label there. Excellent. Okay, so we will keep cruising. That is sort of the second piece of our meeting today, and we are going to go ahead and start our business meeting. So I'm going to pass things back over to the EKISC chair, Randy Harris, and we'll just go along. I'm going to mute myself now, and I'll just be moving through the slides here, Randy.
Okay. This is the business portion of our meeting. It's actually the legal reason we have to actually meet at least once a year, mostly to check in for their membership, but also to meet the legal requirements for the Societies Act of British Columbia. And there's several things that, if it seems cumbersome, this is the way you have to do it. What we are going to be going through here is we'll be presenting the usual things, but because it's very difficult for us to carry a vote, what we will do is ask for a motion, ask for a second, and then ask anybody by using the chat box if you're opposed to it, and then we have to go into a discussion. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to make a motion to commence the 2020 business meeting, and I'm asking for a second. Just put your name in the chat box. Okay, thank you, Bailey. So is there anyone opposed to commencing with the business meeting? We'll wait a bit. Okay, and just based on the rules that we have around Zoom meetings, we'll go forward now. So we'll commence the business meeting. Now the next one is this is the agenda that you see in front of you. Now I'd like to make a motion to adopt this 2020 business meeting agenda. And I'm asking for a second. If anybody could type their name in. Okay, thank you, Shauna Larad. Okay, is there anyone who is opposed? We'll just wait a bit here. Okay, with that, no, we'll carry forward. The other one is, the next one is the motion to adopt the 2019 business meeting minutes. Those were distributed for you in the meeting package for this meeting, and hopefully you've all had a chance to read them. And I'd like to make a motion to adopt the 2019 meeting minutes. Could I have a second? Okay, thank you again, Shauna Larad. Okay, now, is there anyone opposed to adopting the meeting minutes? Okay, give it another minute. Okay, with no objections, we'll adopt the meeting minutes. Now from here, I believe we have, is Shauna Baker online, Kendall? We'd like to bring Shauna Baker. Oops, sorry. Okay, we'd like to bring in our chartered accountant, Shauna Baker, to present our 2019 financials, the stuff that we did last year. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, great.
Yes. Thanks, Shauna. And I can just navigate for you as we go through here. So if you can just direct me, I'll do my best to cruise along.
Great, thanks,
Okay,
Kendall.
sure.
Okay.
Hello, Shauna?
I'm here. I'm just waiting for Kendall to bring
Okay,
up the financials.
Okay, so I've got them up. Are you able to see my screen?
No, I just see where it says 2019 financials presented by me.
Oh, interesting.
Actual financials.
Okay, hold on one second. Oh,
I think you might have the wrong file, Kendall.
I do, I've got it on my screen, but just one moment. There we go. Can you see it now?
Yeah, I can see it. I can't read it. It's really tiny.
Yeah, so where we can start here with the statement of, yeah.
Okay, so this is the statement of operations. This is basically the equivalent of a profit and loss or an income statement. Just Can you scroll just up a little bit, please, Kendall? Sorry, I can't see the top line. There we go. So in the first column, we've got the 2019 actuals as compared to the 2019 budget. And then, of course, we have comparatively the 2018. So just a high-level view, EKISC did very well again this year. The revenues, although they do show as being down on the next screen, we'll just leave it for now, but about $60,000 of that that would be added on to the 922 was deferred into the 2020 fiscal year based on the fact that those contracts run into 2020. So when we get into that revenue schedule, we'll see that the numbers are in line with the budget. The only difference here is that we've moved some of those into the next fiscal. When we look into the expenses, administration overall budgeted 129 almost, actual was 126. Nothing is really out of the ordinary. Kendall runs a very tight ship, and the numbers that are represented with the budget and the actuals, there's no major differences. Herbicide, a little bit more spent on herbicide this year than the budgeted amount, and there was more in the inventory that was available to do that with. In terms of treatments, so 466,000 compared to the budget of 469. That just relates to the actual contract work that was done by the different contractors. Again, you know, a couple $1,000s difference, but nothing major. Field work, total 145,000 compared to 151. Big difference, just a little bit less in the wages. Again, everything else is very on line with what the expectation was with the budget that was set out. Outreach programs, 87 as compared to 84. And again, it's relating back to the outreach wages. It's just a couple $1,000s difference there, but everything again is very in line with what the expectation was. So total expenditures for the year was 912,000 compared to our budgeted amount of 909,000, giving us a revenue, excess of revenue over our expenditures and before adjustments of about 9,500. So that's good for EKISC that it's showing a little bit of a profit. We would want that. The next one is the adjustments line, which is the disposal of the capital assets. So the truck that was purchased, I believe 2 years ago, was disposed of this last fiscal. And based on what the selling price was versus what the book value of the truck was, there was a loss of $8,300. So that brings our excess of revenue over our expenses down to about $1,000. It was projected to be about $4,500, but again, it's just the way it worked out overall in the year. That's the loss on disposal of the capital assets is not really a cash flow item. It was already expensed in prior years. So in terms of where EKISC is sitting at, it looks good. Kendall, if you want to go to the next page, I think it's page 7, sorry. So this is the schedule of revenues by funder. And so this is what the number, so if you can scroll down just to the bottom of that one, just to do the comparison. So this one here, you'll see at the very bottom, the total revenues is 922,000, and that agrees to the financial statements of the operations on the last page we just reviewed at the 922. Again, when we look at it line by line, everything is in line. The one major difference was the excess. So the internal crew went out, and there was about $8,000 more in what the actual work was generated by the internal crew than was budgeted, and just a few more, a little bit more money in terms of the merchandise sales. There was quite a few, you know, when we look at the line there, $3,580 versus $3,100. So overall, again, in terms of the budget where we were sitting at, and those are the two line items that make up that difference. Again, $60,000 of that was deferred into the 2020 fiscal. And there's a note disclosure on that in the notes page, so we can look at to see, you know, who was actually deferred into 2020. And then there was deferred revenues that were being carried forward from the 2018 fiscal of 25.5. So that leaves us with the other bit of revenues for interest income, and that was on the money that was given by Flinro and has been sitting in investment that was recognized this year. So in terms of the overall where everything's sitting at revenues and in terms of what the budgeted amounts where the contracts were, they're all in line to what the expectation was. Kendall, can you go to the next page, the notes page? Please, thank you. So this one just shows out the capital assets. Of course, there's no assets, it was sold. And note 3 is, and we're gonna see this on the balance sheet in a minute. So the unearned revenues was 226,000 as compared to what was there last year, which was 452. And that's just because those were the revenues that were prepaid and have now been recognized, and the remaining amount will come into the 2020 fiscal of the 226,300. Deferred revenues, and this is the 60,489 that we just showed on the last statement by funder, and this is the amounts as broken down by funders themselves. So, you know, BC, there was nothing from BC Parks, but CBTs, there was 14.6 deferred. The Habitat Conservation Trust Fund was about 4,800. The wildfire recovery is 24.5. I know there was some more work that was going to be done this next fiscal. And of course, the Rocky Mountain Trench was 16,592 this year, making up that amount. So those funds will be recognized in the 2020 fiscal. So it's no different. And there's the 25.5 of what was recognized into revenues this current fiscal. Last note disclosure is just the internal crew. And again, the value of the work that was done was $71,215 by the crew itself, which was, you know, funds that could have been spent by the contractors, but was generated internally. So it just at a cheaper rate, a much cheaper rate. Okay, and then we'll just go back up to page 2, which will probably be page 4, I think, Kendall. Thanks, and just, yeah. So this is your assets and your liabilities, and it's going to tie back into the notes that and what we just went through. There's money in the cash in the bank this year, 54,000. Last year there was an overdraft of about 5,800, so you'll see that in the comparative for 2018 under the liability section. Like I said, the investment itself is just being utilized now, and so as the funds are needed, then it gets taken back out. Same thing will happen with the 2020 fiscal, then the 237 should be basically recognized as revenues, or coming back in as cash. All the accounts receivable have since been, I believe, collected. Due from government agency, this is the amount of GST that was receivable from the government. And the last one is the inventory, of course, for about $59,000. So that's that extra, basically $9,000 of herbicide treatment that we saw in the statement of operations. In the lower section there, accounts payable and accrued liabilities in line due to government agencies. Again, amounts just have since been paid, but they're identified as a liability at that point in time. Unearned revenues, again, there's our 226 for the note disclosure that we just discussed in note 3, and there's our deferred revenues. So total assets is 516,000, and of course you can see we're down from the prior year, and that's primarily because of the investment now being recognized as revenues, less in accounts receivable, but more from government agencies. So yeah, everything looks really good. It's nice to see, again, a bit of a profit. And I know I've mentioned this in past AGMs. You know, for a nonprofit, we do want to be able to show and be able to create some kind of a contingency fund, so that in the event that something were to happen and funding wasn't available, then there's something there to, you know, float basically the society for until there's some more funding, or to be able to deal with the wind down. And I think that's it for me. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, if there are any questions, could you put them into the chat box? Okay. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. Give it a few more minutes here, or a moment more. Okay, and now that I've seen the money, I see people are dropping out too. Okay, John, it looks like you answered everybody's questions, and I think we sent this out ahead of time so people had a chance to take a look at it. So going back to the meeting minutes, could I make a motion to accept the 2019 financials? If you could, please put your name in the chat box. Okay, thank you, Shauna. Okay, other Shauna. Is there anyone opposed to accepting the financials? Okay, I'm not seeing anybody, so I'll deem the financials accepted then. Okay, our next order of business is to do the board members, like who's going to be continuing, because we serve 2-year terms on the EKISC board, and we typically stagger the board so that half the board, their terms end every year. So far, myself as independent forestry consultant will be carrying on, and these are the 5 people who carry on. Rick Taggart from the Windermere Farmers Institute, Stephanie Nada from Canfor, Rick Van Horn from the BC Hunters and Anglers will carry on, and Dave Pick from he lives up in the Windermere area. He's our member at large. So those folks, no voting on them. We'll see them next year to see if they actually want to carry on. We do have 3 people who stepped down this year. Lilly Durham, who has with us since 2015, and she represented the Waldo Stock Breeders Association. And well, she served as secretary, and she did as a great service on the contract committee. She's one of the few people who actually really enjoys going through contracts to see if we can improve them. And that's a tough old job. We're gonna miss her, but we've but she has put forward a replacement. Jim Campbell, he served 1 term with us. He was representing the BC Hunters and Anglers, but that role has been taken over by Rick Van Horn, who's not on the table today. But yeah, we'd like to thank Jim because he actually made sure that we didn't forget it's not just about the valley bottom of the cows, but there's also creatures in the backcountry. And Pam Turek, who I can agree with, she represented the Kootenai Livestock Association, and I think she served every position on the board. And I can agree with everything that Stephanie Daniel said about her, but Stephanie had known her considerably longer. Yeah, and she was also, she served as the vice chair while I was chair, and that was a good to find out what had gone on and get some history on the issues that had come up. And I won't say anything more about that other than I became chair because she tricked me. Now, we do have some following directors who are up for re-election this year. One of them is Steffi Daniels from the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. So she's agreed to stand for another 2-year term. Shauna Larad from the Ministry of Natural Resource Operations and Resource Development. And she's agreed to stand for another 2. And Jamie Davies from the Regional District East Kootenai. So that's all good. And we have 2 new directors who've agreed. Raylan Blumhagen has agreed to take Lilly Durham's place, representing the Waldo Stock Breeders Livestock Association. Just so you know who Raylan is, because we're being asked to vote on her. She was born and raised in Jaffrey and is a 5th-generation rancher living on her family cow-calf operations with her husband and 2 daughters. Raylan worked in the weed industry as a summer job while attending university and really became interested in the impact they have in the area. And she's currently sitting, we've brought her on since last December, as a member of the board of directors for the Waldo Stock Breeders Association. And this is coming into her 2nd year, and she's happy to join the board in 2020. So she'll be up in 2022. Just last week, Hillary Baker has agreed to join us. She's an agrologist consultant, and she's a professional agrologist working with invasive species in every facet of her profession. Hillary recently moved from Pincher Creek, where she worked as a rangeland agrologist, and she's now based in Cranbrook as an environmental professional with Key for Ecological Services and advisor in the Kootenai Boundary Farm Advisors. Hillary is passionate about preserving native grasslands, providing support and resources to producers, and providing education outreach opportunities to public and stakeholders. Raylan isn't actually on the line right now. Did Hillary want to add anything else? Because I did see that she looks like she's online. Nope, okay. We're really pleased to actually see that 3 of our board directors are carrying on. Oh, there you go. And we're really glad to actually see two more people actually stepping forward to join the board, because there's a considerable amount of work that we've been asking out of the board this last year. Now, there's a requirement for us to say, does anyone else actually want to stand to be nominated to the board or to nominate somebody else for the board? And I've got to ask this 3 times. So I'm not stuttering, it's just, this is a legal requirement. Okay, now the second time, would anyone else like to be nominated to the board? Oh, still no takers. It's a prestigious position, you should really think about it. And would anyone else like to be nominated to the board? Oh, people are leaving as they actually get afraid we'll nominate them. Okay, with that, I'd like to a motion to elect the board members listed above, Stephanie, Shauna, James, Raylan, and Hillary, as presented. Could I have a second, please? Thank you, Bailey. Okay, is there anyone opposed? Okay, seeing no one opposed, the motion is carried. And with that, we've got a new board. And that wraps up our business meeting. It's a little strange not asking for a conversation, but that wraps up our business meeting. So, Kendall, could you actually close us out here?
Yes, thank you so much, Randy, and thanks for the board members that have agreed to stay with us for another couple of years, and we're really excited to have Raylan and Hillary join us as well. And yeah, that is it. Thanks for sticking it out with us. We do have one more draw prize. I think Bailey was going to potentially get some names ready in a hat. So Bailey, I'm going to act under the operation that you, or the assumption that you have prepared some names out of a hat for folks who are still with us. And when you're ready, are you able to announce the winner of our final door prize?
For sure. Thanks everyone for sticking out to the end. I have the names in an I Heart Water hat. It'll be a part of the final prize, although that one will be a little cleaner than mine is. Give her a little shake here, and hopefully whoever I pick is still present. All right, and we have Shauna Larad.
All right.
That's our winner.
Shauna, lucky winner number 3. Okay, so thanks so much, Bailey. Again, these are a lot of the folks that support us, and Tech generously supported this AGM as well, and we'll be sending out some awesome door prizes and meeting packages to everybody. Again, if Bailey doesn't have your address, then please send it to her so she can send you a little package in the mail, probably sometime next week. And the last thing that we need to do here is to adjourn the meeting. So we just need to get somebody to put forward a motion to adjourn the meeting and then second it, and then we will be done for the year. We also have a feedback survey that Bailey is going to be sending it out in advance, and I'm just going to pop it into the chat box right now as well. But in the meantime, I'm just going to stop screen sharing, and let's see, did we get somebody to adjourn the meeting here? I'm just grabbing that meeting link and we'll send it out as well. Here we go. Okay, can we get a seconder to adjourn the meeting? Perfect, Shauna and Hillary, great. Thank you so much. And that's it. Thanks for sticking with us. If you want to stick around for a couple seconds, I'll put the survey link in the chat box, and Bailey will also be sending it out. And enjoy the rest of your afternoon.